Thank you for tuning in to Terry Swoop Videos. On today's video, I'm going to do a tribute video to the beautiful child actress, Dana Plato. Now, I was raised in the 80s, and my favorite show as a kid was Diff'rent Strokes. What I loved about this show was how colorblind it was. It wasn't focusing on race. It was all about bringing people together regardless of race. It was a funny show. It was a very entertaining show. And this is the reason why it was the #1 show in the country during the early 1980s. Now, the show was about a white man who adopts 2 black boys. And he raises these 2 black boys like they're his real sons. And Dana Plato's character plays their sister. And she treats them like they're her real brothers. And nobody focused on race. They all looked at each other like they were a real family. And a show like this really brought the country together as far as race relations during the 1980s. Now, Dana Plato was born in November 7th, 1964. She was born from a teenage mother living in poverty. Her mother gave her up for adoption when she was 1 year old. She ended up being adopted by a middle-class family. Her mother got her into acting during the 1970s, and she also got her into dancing and ice skating. She was such a good ice skater that she actually qualified for the Olympic team. But her mother decided that a career in acting would be a better way to go because ice skaters don't have very long careers. So she turned down the Olympic team to play on Diff'rent Strokes when she was 14 years old in 1978. Dana Plato was on Diff'rent Strokes for the first 6 seasons from 1978 to 1983. She ended up being kicked off the show when she got pregnant at 19 years old. The producers of the show said they didn't want a teenage girl being pregnant on the show. They said that this would send a bad message to a lot of the kids that were watching the show. So they ended up kicking her off the show for this reason. Now, after she left the show, her career went downhill. She started being addicted to drugs and alcohol. She was in and out of rehabs, and her career spiraled out of control. Now, when Dana Plato was on the Diff'rent Strokes, she was making over $100,000 an episode. By the late 1980s, she was so broke, she was working at a cleaning salon for $6 an hour. How do you go from making $100,000 an episode to working at a cleaning factory for $6 an hour? This is how broke she became. And all her money was blown away from lawyer fees and things of that nature. That's what she said. She said her money was stolen from a lawyer. I don't believe that. I think she blew away a lot of her money on drugs. I believe she blew a lot of her money away on drugs and mismanagement. And this is how she ended up going broke. Now, she got roles outside of Diff'rent Strokes, but a lot of these roles that she got were not big paying roles. She posed for Playboy. She also appeared in a Sega video game, but a lot of these other parts didn't pay a lot of money. And this is why she went right back to being broke and working at a cleaning salon. In 1991, Dana is arrested for robbing a video store. And what's crazy about this is that she robs the store with a pellet gun. As soon as she walks into the store, the clerk recognizes her right away. And the clerk calls 911, and she says, "The girl from Diff'rent Strokes just robbed me." She stole $164, and she was arrested right away because everybody recognizes her. Everybody knows who she is. But she was so hungry for drugs and alcohol, she was willing to do anything to get that money so she can go get drunk and go get high.
Child actress, and her life spiraled out of control. Her name, Dana Plato. You remember her from Diff'rent Strokes, but she made headlines here in Las Vegas, and it was for all the wrong reasons. Tom Hawley reports.
Gee, Adelaide, it's so nice and quiet here without the boys.
Dana Plato had been in the limelight. When it ended, she did a couple of B movies and posed in Playboy magazine, but her career was going nowhere. By early 1991, she was working the counter at Al Phillips on West Flamingo, thrifty dry cleaners today. Then, out of money, Plato went to a nearby video store.
I had the door open, she came in, stopped at the counter, and she pulled out a gun.
Clerk Heather Daly recognized her immediately, but handed over the money, then called police.
And they caught her coming back for her glasses that she dropped when she jumped over the wall.
It was all over the newspaper.
She appeared on different talk shows throughout the 1990s, talking about her struggles with drugs and alcohol. In 1999, she appeared on the Howard Stern show, and this was her last interview. And this is the saddest interview I ever seen before in my life. Because the very next day, she commits suicide with a drug overdose. And when you watch this interview on Howard Stern, during the entire interview, she's telling Howard that she doesn't do drugs anymore. And the whole time, people are calling into the show, making fun of her, putting her down, bashing her, and she's crying throughout the entire show. And it's really sad to listen to. I'm going to leave the link in the description box for any person to want to watch that interview. It's really sad. But people were calling into the show and they were like, "You're lying, Dana. You're still doing drugs." And she said, "No, I'm not doing drugs. I'm not doing anything." And Howard Stern was like, "We're going to give you a drug test. We're going to give you a drug test so you can prove that you're not doing drugs." And it was really sad. You can tell this really hurt her. It really hurt her. So the very next day, she ends up committing suicide. And she dies at the age of 34 in 1999. And she left behind a son. And what's really sad is her son ends up committing suicide several years later, because her son was so broken up from her death, he ends up committing suicide. So it's a tragic loss. She probably has the most tragic story in the history of Hollywood. In the history of Hollywood, Dana Plato has the most tragic story of any celebrity in the history of Hollywood. Nobody failed this hard. Nobody in the history of Hollywood that I can recall fell from grace this hard like she did. So it's a really tragic story. She was a beautiful woman, beautiful actress, and it's sad to see her lose her life at such a young age. But a lot of people have different opinions about this topic. If you want to watch that Howard Stern interview, the link is in the description box. Leave a comment, rate, and subscribe.